Hi guys, welcome back. This shall be episode 2 of the N55 E91 with a DCT gearbox build. So picking up from where we left off, where I explained how I'm going to try and make one car out of 3, this is the engine out of the E81 135i with the DCT gearbox still attached. And as you can see, it's had a few oil leaks in its time which haven't been addressed. And they caused all sorts of issues. So oil is just literally everywhere, on the side of the block, on the engine mounts, on the front subframe. It's dripped onto the gearbox, and the culprits are the cam cover gasket and the 2 oil filter housing gaskets. So the ones just at the top and between the oil filter housing and the oil thermostat. And as a result of that, all of the cables are covered in oil. The turbo side isn't too bad, but it's still quite oily. It's also had an aftermarket downpipe fitted without the bell housing bracket, which was quite loose. So that's going to need to be replaced. All of the front end is literally caked in oil. So the plan is to take it apart as much as possible in order to clean it. Clean it first and foremost, and then replace the gaskets and potentially the front end FEAD stuff, belt and pulleys and all that, and then reassemble it back together, replacing whatever else needs doing along the way. So first things first, let's get it stripped and let's get it cleaned. So after probably about 30 cans of brake cleaner and some substantial scraping and scrubbing, we're at a point where the engine is now more or less clean. So on closer inspection, everything looks okay. It doesn't look to have too many carbon deposits in the inlet ports, and it doesn't look to have any other substantial issues other than the gaskets, which we'll replace next. So we're going to do the oil filter housing gaskets, the cam cover gasket, and also we'll replace all of the stuff that we've taken off from the auxiliary belt and all the pulleys and that. So it looks like somebody's been here before and they've used siliconator on the crank seal and on the high pressure fuel pump seal, and there's probably some silicone around the oil filter housing gaskets and around this side. But now that it's nice and clean, it's actually easier to see and it should be easier to work on. So hopefully we'll get that done. And also, we're going to fit a downpipe. So what have we here? This is the bracket that was missing for the bell housing, some new hardware from BMW, new gaskets, new nuts and bolts, new V-band clamp to go between the downpipe and the turbo, and a new squash ring. So now that some of the stuff is back on the engine, we can go on to replace the engine mounts. And we're using Lemforder. They are sided, so make sure you don't mix them up, but they do have some idiot proofing on them. And once they're on, we're going to assemble the subframe onto the bottom of the engine and try and get the entire assembly in as one thing. So rather than putting the engine into the car, we're going to lift it up. And we're also going to replace the gearbox bushings, or the gearbox mounts, if you like, with length order as well. So now that I've removed everything, this is the state of the crank pulley, and as you can see, it's caked in silicone and bits of discarded rubber, which was mixed with oil, and I'm assuming that's pieces of the drive belt. The rest of the pulleys are the same, the ones that are ribbed, so the alternator pulley and the AC pulley. So they'll need to be cleaned as well. The old belt and idler pulleys were completely ruined. They were making a squeaking noise, the belt was disintegrating because of all the oil and silicone on it. So we made a decision to get this kit, which essentially replaced all of the FEAD stuff on the front end. So let's have a look. This is the kit, which is an OEM kit for N55, 3 and 1 series. And it comes with a new belt and some new pulleys. And also a sticker, so you can put a date when it was all replaced. Not that I'm planning to do that, but oh well. So, what have we? Tensioner with idler pulleys and bolt with a tensioner pin inserted. Another idler pulley with a little cap. And another pulley with another cap. So this is what's in the kit, and I think it's well worth it if you've got the front end off to replace the whole lot. It's not super expensive. I think it was in the region of about 80 to about £100, so not too bad of a hit financially, and it should make everything come together quite nicely. Now onto the cam cover gasket and the oil filter housing gaskets. We are also replacing the water pump. We're going to be using Pierberg instead of the OE Continental, because Pierberg has aluminium front cover, which if it was plastic it's prone to cracking. So hopefully this should last a little bit longer than the OE one and should be a nice little upgrade. So at this point we're more or less ready to start assembling everything back together, and as you can imagine, a lot of the things are different. So we'd have to replace that because the size of the port is different, as well as the entire fuel system. So the tank itself, the charcoal canister and all the breather lines will have to be used from the 3 Series because they're different on the 1 Series. If you're wondering about the condition of the underbody, at the moment we're not addressing it because this will be its own separate project when the weather gets better. So for the moment we're just going to do the conversion and try and get it running. Once the car is running and then the weather gets better in about 3 or 4 months time, we plan to take it all back apart, take this down to bare metal and restore the underbody. So we are using 1 Series rear axle complete. It has a specific diff which is not the same as it was on the 3 Series, so we have to use this rear axle which bolts straight on. We will be using some of the parts from the 335. So the heat shields come from the 335. Some of these parts, so we're going to use an M Sport rear bumper, and M Sport rear bumper side mounts are different to the SE ones. So this is what's come off the 320, and as you can see, that bumper carrier, the rear crash bar, is different. This one is the one from the 335. It has additional mounting points for the exhausts and additional mounting points for the diffuser. These are M Sport bumper carriers, the side ones. Those are SE ones, so that's not going to be used. This is going to be used, and the same on this side. And these mounting points are in different places and so on and so forth. So it's important to use them because we're going to be using the SE, not the SE, the M Sport bumper, which is just there. We also have to use the 335 boot floor, which is different to allow for the exhaust, and the exhaust system, which is just behind the bumper there. Now, onto the fuel system, it has to be from this car. Pretty much everything up to the engine has to be from this car. So the fuel tank and the lines, as well as the charcoal canister and all the breather lines, will have to be removed from here and transplanted onto the other car that's in the garage. And then there's also additional bracing, so that bracket there is for the V-brace to mount on, additional reinforcement, which is specific to the 335. But luckily the bodies are identical, so all the mounting points are already there. So we're just going to move that across. And this is the rear axle from this car. We're not using it, but what we do need to use from it are the handbrake cables, because they're ever so slightly longer than the 1 Series ones, because this car is obviously longer than the 1 Series was. And to bridge it all together, we need to use a 1 Series specific, not a 1 Series, a 3 Series specific DCT drive shaft. So one of these is DCT and one of these is auto, and they are different because they're different length. I can't quite remember which one is which, but I'll figure it out when we come to fit it. So the drive shaft, that's what you call it when you're in America, or prop shaft if you're in Europe, is a 3 Series specific, and the DCT diff is also specific. So there's a 3 Series drive shaft that goes with the DCT diff that basically makes this conversion all possible. So now we'll try and get the fuel tank in along with all the lines and pipes. Once that's done, we'll try and get the axle in, the rear bumper carrier, the supporting brackets, and then maybe even get the bumper on, get the suspension on, and that should be the mechanical side of things complete. So I think this is a good point to wrap it all up and finish the video. And let's go through what I've covered so far. So body wise, it's going to go LCI M Sport. Pre-LCI bumper is the same. I've managed to find a very rare M Performance diffuser, which is a genuine part and is no longer available from BMW. So that's going to be going on once it's all one colour. I've refitted the tail lights, refitted the boot floor. There's still plenty to do. Got to adjust the spoiler because it's just catching here. This is the front M Sport bumper, which is going to be going on LCI, along with adaptive dynamic xenon headlights. As for the rear axle, we used 135i rear axle complete as it is, with brakes and everything. The fuel system, the fuel tank, the breather system and the fuel lines are all from the N54 335i, which is there. So that's all bolted straight in, everything mated to the N55 stuff and to the car perfectly. No additional mounting points needed, just everything moved across from there to there. So, and that's including the fuel cap and the filler neck and the overflow line and all the other bits and pieces. Now moving on, we'll still replace the side skirts with the M Sport ones, and I think I'll get some shadow line off of that car and put it on here just so it's nice and glossy and premium, because I do like shadow line on the car. I think it makes all the difference, and I'm not going to have to deal with all these faded grey plastics. The front end, I have fitted the suspension from, so the shock absorbers are from my 330i, they're Bilstein B8, and the springs are H&R springs for 6-cylinder petrol E91s. I've used new top mounts, and I'm also going to replace the arms. So the arms are going to come from my 330i, they're M3 arms. We're going to fit the M3 arms on. I've replaced the wheel bearings with FAG Schaeffler wheel bearings. I've still got to fit the backing plates, which have arrived, and I'm going to need to bleed the brakes. We are using Hell Performance braided lines and F-Series 4-piston 340mm front brake setup and 135 2-piston rear setup. So engine and gearbox, it's all in. New engine mounts and new transmission mounts, length order. We've got new OEM plugs in there from BMW. I've cleaned all the plug bores. We've replaced the rocker cover gasket, which was quite painful. We've also replaced the oil filter housing gaskets, so the one that goes to the thermostat and oil cooler feed, the one that sits just there, and the one that's between the housing and the block, so the one sits just there. We used OEM gaskets for this. The front end stuff we replaced with the inner kit, so belt and idler pulleys and tensioner. So I think 1, 2, 3, 4 pulleys and the tensioner and the new belt. The crank pulley I cleaned, as you saw earlier. Can do with giving this a little one last spray. I tried cleaning the power steering pump and the AC pump as well, so I think they're okay. I've washed down the block and I've scraped it as much as I possibly could, along with the head and the wiring harness, because all of this was absolutely caked in oil and in silicon. So it looks, you can actually see the aluminium now. There is a bit of silicon there, which I think is to stop the this cap from leaking oil, and this is where the high pressure fuel pump sits. So I'm hoping that's not going to be an issue. And there is still a little bit of silicon, I think, on the sump gasket as well, but that shouldn't be too much of a problem. Now, this is the Mickey Mouse flange, which as soon as we touched it, it just broke the spigot off. So aluminium Mickey Mouse flange with an OEM BMW O-ring. That's been fitted. This is the turbo side. I did have a brand new thermostat for the car, but it was an N54 thermostat, which has a slightly different angle, a 90-degree angle on one of the spigots on the back, so it didn't fit, sadly. So we've reused the old thermostat, which we know works well and there's no issues with it. This is the Pierberg aluminium water pump with the aluminium face, so hopefully that should be good. The only thing that worries me is that I know the updated Continental water pumps have a bushing in this connection here to stop some of the engine vibrations getting transferred to the water pump, which I think prolongs the life of it, but Pierberg doesn't have that, so I'm hoping it's not going to fail anytime soon. But that's the water pump there. This is the heat exchanger for the gearbox, I believe. So I've cleaned all the pipes up as well and replaced the little nut there that holds it, and cleaned everything around there up as well. This here is going to be replaced with a brand new one. So this is the power steering cooler, which you can see is breaking apart. It's not leaking, but it's not going to be the most efficient at cooling the power steering. So I've got a brand new one from BMW, which I'm yet to fit. I think it's just here somewhere along with the DCT stuff. Here we are. That's the puppy. So that's going to go on with the front end eventually. And then I'm going to move on to the wiring, and the wiring is going to be tricky. So with the wiring, I'm keeping half of the wiring loom from E91 and the other half of the wiring loom, which is responsible for the engine and the gearbox, from the 1 Series. And then hopefully I should be able to make it work using 1 Series modules, and then just recode the modules of the 1 Series for them to sort of know that they have additional doors in the tailgate and so on and so forth, so to know that they're in E91 now. So I think in the next episode I'm mainly going to focus on trying to sort the wiring out. I need to connect the fuel line and the vapor line, which are underneath because I fitted the tank, and luckily the connection points are in the same place. They're just over there. I'm not sure if you can see them. I just need to remove the old diesel ones, and I need to connect the petrol ones. I'll also remove that there, which is the old hydraulic line for the clutch pedal. I need to connect the earth, which is just there, the earth cable, just that one there, and repair that wiring because it doesn't look very good. It looks like somebody's been there before. And once the electrical is on and I actually get some communication with the modules and everything, I will then look into disconnecting the water pump and disconnecting the fuel pump, or perhaps just disabling it with a fuse removal. Then put some fresh oil in it, because at the moment it's empty. Put some fresh oil in it, prime it, get it to tick over, get it to prime for a few seconds, just so we can get the oil circulating, because it's been probably about a year since this engine ran, so we've got to get the oil back up to the top of the head and generate a bit of oil pressure. And then hopefully I'll connect the fuel pump back on, the water pump, and I'll try and get it started. So I might not actually connect the water pump, and I might just try and get it started with perhaps the belt removed, just to see whether it's firing or not. And then once we're at that point where it's firing, I know it starts, I can think about putting the front end on, the slam panel, the cooling pack, intercooler, the radiators, all the pipe work, and everything else. Now, the back end, I've just got to fit the shock absorbers, which are the Bilstein ones off of my 330i, just over there, because that's going to be for sale soon, sadly. But anyway, I've got to fit them, and along with the top mount kit, which is here, and the bottom mounts as well, because the old ones have disintegrated. So that's going to be the suspension side of things, and then once we've got it starting and we've got everything else sort of bolted to it, I can think about putting the exhaust on as the last point. So exhaust from N54 should bolt straight on to the N55, because the connection point from the downpipe, which is just here, so this is the old downpipe that didn't fit very well, but this is the turbo side, and this is where it mates to the rest of the exhaust, to the cold end essentially. And this connection spigot is exactly the same, and this point in the car is exactly the same. So in theory I should be able to take the N54 exhaust off of that and bolt it straight on with some new hardware and some new gaskets. And then once that's done, technically the car's going to be drivable. We can put some number plates on it, get it MOT'd, roadworthy, get it taxed, and then take it for a shakedown, drive it for a few weeks, and then see where we are with it. And then the final step is going to be to get all of the interior in properly, to get all the bumpers painted, to have the paint correction done, get the shadow line on, and so on and so forth, get some coating done. Yeah, basically see how we get on with it. So the way I like to build big projects is you first make it work, then you make sure it works, and then you make it pretty. So at this point now, I'm still making it work. And then once it works, we need to make sure it works and it's not going to self-destruct. And then once we're at that point, we can think about making it pretty and having it painted and polished and have a few little minor dents taken out, like that one there on the door, and just keeping it nice and clean and enjoying the car. But thanks for watching, guys. If you like this sort of stuff, you know what to do. Still plenty more things coming on this car and later on that car, and then on the supercharged car, which is just over there somewhere. So yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you again in the next one. Take it easy.